Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Élie Tenenbaum, I'm the head of the Security Studies Center at Ifri, the French Institute of International Relations, and I will have the great honor today to moderate, or try to moderate this first panel with all the five chiefs who've been presented by Admiral Vaujour. So I will not be longer on the introduction. I hope that you will forgive me for that. But we're running a bit short on time, and I really want you to have the opportunity to ask some questions to the panel. So I dive right into the questions. Originally, we had thought that maybe we could outline three big choke points, as you sailors may say or look at the sea. The first is, of course, looking at the threat landscape, how you perceive it throughout your career, and especially in the position that you're currently holding. Then moving to the responses that you are developing in terms of capability development and more general in terms of naval and maritime strategies that you're developing in your respective position. And maybe if we have time to look a bit further in terms of personnel readiness, interoperability issues. Again, this is a pretty heavy agenda. We have just about an hour to cover all that with five of the strongest and most impressive navies in the room. So I would really appreciate strong answers and short ones, so we can cover everything. Admiral Vaujour, of course, you're our host today. So maybe I turn to you to start with. You have been commanding the French Navy for almost 3 years now, and a lot has happened since. As you know, as an observer of strategic and defense issues, I can say that there has been a lot in the threat landscape challenging. What are the main features that retain today your attention, and are you looking to the future that may threaten this air-sea superiority that Western navies have enjoyed so far, and that may look like being challenged today? Admiral.
And you say short answer. That's it? Okay.
Yeah. If you can solve the problem in 2 minutes, I'd be very grateful.
Okay. No, I will try to be short. First of all, I think that, of course, we are in a new era of violence. And the first thing which is really important, that the tool of international law, the regulation, are not anymore in function at the moment. So it means that we are in a period of assertion of power, where we need to have the tools of power inside our hands in order to face all the challenge. So the first thing is the disinhibition, the violence, which we saw on the sea, as we saw on the earth, as we can saw in Ukraine, for example. The second thing is that the threat is diversifying. I mean, it is not only on the surface or submarines, it is from seabed to space. So it means for navies that we must be able to operate from the seabed to space, which was not the case 10 years ago. So the threat landscape is growing up at the moment. We saw also that we are not facing only state actors like Russia or other, but we are able to face also some proxy like Houthis in the Red Sea. And the Houthis were able to challenge us with not only small craft, but USV, UAV, anti-ship missile, ballistic missiles, and so on. So not only state actors, but also proxy, militia, and so on, are able to challenge us on the seas. And for that, we can add the technological upcoming in the theater. And we have for that the good example of Ukraine, where the drones were able to push very far away the Russian fleet. And with that, it's also a new way of doing our business at sea, which emerge. And so if I can conclude just on that, so you have technology issues, you have not only state actors but also militia and proxies. You have geographic issues about the threat from seabed to space. And for all that, one key word at the end of the day for the navies is to be adaptable. I mean, the key success of Ukraine is agility. And so for us is how in that new threat landscape we are able to build a navy adaptable by design.
Thank you very much, Admiral. I mean, you've shown the example by remaining in the time, and on top of that, already giving us a hint on the second question. So I congratulate you. Now I'm turning to Admiral Caudle. Admiral, the U.S. Navy is, you know, by all means, still the most formidable and greatest navy on earth. And you've been present in all the seven seas, we could say, the oceans, but of course also turning very strongly in the last decade towards the Indo-Pacific, which has been stated as the pacing challenge. Looking at this area, but also at the other areas where you've been operating, what do you see in terms of convergence of threats or the diversification of threats? So, like, how do you see this landscape evolving? What are the lessons that can be transferable to a theater to another?
Well, make sure this is on. Yeah. Well, first of all, Nicolas, thank you for hosting us here at the Paris Naval Conference. It's a real honor to be here with this group. When I think about the question you're asking, you know, I jotted down a couple notes here. One of the things that concerns me is just the absolute capacity that we have to deal with, in particular with the PRC. And I think you have to look at that from the perspective of the capacity versus specific capabilities that each country that we might be concerned with are going to field. It's easy for us to get a bit enamored with what those are today without really understanding the trend and how those threats are growing and emerging. And so without understanding our ability to forecast what those threats are going to look like in the future, when we're talking about our force designs, in particular things that are capital intensive like navies, where shipbuilding and construction of our units of force take time in years, not in days or weeks, that these trends have to be understood so that the actual capability of our forces are built in. Nicolas talked about his contract for his new carrier. You know, by the time that's built, the entire landscape could be completely different. So without building into that design, the adaptability to do that in stride is going to be very challenging. The third thing I would say quickly is intelligence gathering, the analysis, the distribution and sharing of how we see these threats is important amongst our nations. There's an old saying, you can't surge trust, and those relationships have to be built early. Partnerships, especially amongst potential adversaries, force multiply those threats. As we saw in the brain game today, it's easy for partnerships to dilute our force correlation capability, and how we attack and handle those threats is going to matter as new relationships strengthen going forward. And then the last thing I would say is the ever-lowering cost of entry. You know, one of the things I'm very concerned with in overmatching potential threats in the future is the cost of entry for very significant capabilities by adversaries you would not normally think could actually hurt you are now on the table. And we saw this in the Red Sea in particular. So the cost of entry of one-way UAVs, ballistic missiles, cyber, anti-space, the cost of those types of asymmetric capabilities are ever lowering. And so the number of potential adversaries that enter into that need to be monitored. I'll pause there.
Thank you very much, sir. I think that, you know, keeping in mind this, you know, these capabilities that we need to decipher the threat landscape is definitely key. I'm now turning to General Jenkins or Gwyn, thank you for being here. Of course, the Royal Navy, if we're looking at it right now, has strongly improved or strengthened its presence and posture, especially in the North Atlantic, in front of the Russian assertiveness, if we can say so, in the area. So you've been looking at this carefully, but also, other places and deploying in the Indo-Pacific, in farther from a shore. So how do you see this threat landscape unfolding to the future? How do you decipher again your adversary's strategies? What are they trying to, or what do you think they are trying to attempt?
So I'm going to build on both Nicolas and Daryl's points, I think. So do that in kind of reverse order. What are we consider what the trends are here, because I think we can get lost in the detail of individual moves. And there are two kind of really big trends that concern me and that I need to generate a response for right now. One is just the pace of technological change, which is accelerating all the time. If we're baffled by what's going on with AI today, well, then strap in, because next year it's going to be even faster, and the year after that it's going to be even faster. So we're on a very moving landscape at the moment. And then add to that the second macro trend that most concerns me is just the fragmentation of the world order that is taking place right now. We're definitely in a period of geostrategic readjustment. I think that is very difficult to predict how that lands and where we settle. The combination of those two creates uncertainty, and I think our job as Chiefs of Navy is to be able to provide viable responses to that uncertainty. And I think that brings to sort of Nicolas's point that there is a growing threat across a spectrum as well, and particularly in the Atlantic, I think what we see is, we must never forget, and we were discussing as chiefs earlier this morning, sometimes it's easy to forget in some ways that there's a war going on in Europe right now, that millions of people are dying and being injured. And as the media attention gets diverted to whether there is or isn't something going on in Iran or some other part of the world, we've almost normalized a major war on the European continent. But the piece that I get most focused on in the Atlantic, and especially, is the Russian investment in their northern fleet, and in particular in their subsurface capabilities, is undiminished. So despite the horrendous cost in terms of national resource and blood to Russia of their egregious invasion of Ukraine, they had continued to pump resource into their northern fleet and their subsurface capabilities. They continue to produce their latest classes of submarine. Their Gugi subsurface capability is now back at sea after the reset from their horrendous accident a few years ago, and they will test us in that environment. And as others have said, and as we discussed in the brain game this morning, actually it doesn't take many assets to fix us as allies, because we have a very low risk tolerance of allowing a potentially aggressive actor operating in our backyard. And that does take a lot of resource to respond to, which is where you combine all those things together: uncertainty, tech change, a rising threat, particularly from the Russian Northern Fleet. And you have to develop different solutions, because conventional responses, there's only so many complex warships we can build. There's only so many complex nuclear submarines we can build. Just, France is going through a major recapitalization at the moment. We are in the UK. I'm in an incredible position as a Chief of the Navy. I've got 2 classes of frigate in build. I've got 2 classes of nuclear submarine in build, and that is fantastic, but it's not going to be enough. And we're going to need a genuinely innovative approach if we're to respond to this sort of multifaceted challenge that we're facing at the moment.
Thank you, sir. Challenges and threats coming from the north into the Atlantic Bastion. I think this is how you put it in your Navy strategy, but also challenges and threats from the south. I'm now turning to Admiral Berutti Bergotto from the Italian Navy, which has been actively protecting the southern flank of the alliance for years. You commanded Operation Sophia, I think, twice before, and also the Italian Navy has been pretty active in the Red Sea, facing the Houthi threats, those non-state threat that Admiral Vaujour was talking about. Again, from your place and geographic position, but also not limited to it, how do you envision, how do you prepare your Navy, and what do you see coming at you, if I may say so?
First of all, I want to thank Nicolas for inviting us here. It's very important to share some thought about navies and the maritime threat. Now, the southern flank of the alliance, is not a very stable area. A lot of new players are coming in the field, and old players are coming back. So there is a lot of state and non-state actors. They are working, and there is a lot of conflict. Also geographical conflict about the economic exclusive zone between countries. So it is an area where crises are arising every day. It's what I want to point out. There is a lot of North Africa state. They in the last year they grew up as navy forces. And there is some country that they have the submarine capabilities with the deep strike missiles. So it is gonna be very important, our presence there. As you know, the Med Sea is our door, is the European door from the commercial traffic coming from the Indo-Pacific. So there is two important choke points that we need to control. And if something happen outside that choke point, it will be not easy in the Med to deal with. And I'm talking about what happened in the Red Sea with the Houthi. And as you know, the southern flank is plenty of European critical infrastructure. And I'm looking about the communication cables, power cables, oil, gas pipeline. And if you think that the Med is is not a depth sea, it's 80% is less than 3,000 meters. And nowadays, the technology gives you the capability to go easily around 3,000 meters. So it's very important, our presence is very important to be there and see what is going on. But this arises a problem about the operational sustainability. Not all navies can stay at sea for a long period. It can cover 100% of we need to control. So it's very important the work together with the all alliance. Inside the alliance is very important to work by side with the navies, and is most important to have a shared intel capability. So we need to share information because that can help us to be there where we need.
Thank you very much, sir. And you very aptly stressed the challenge of underwater facilities, infrastructures to protect I'm turning to Admiral Liebregs. I know that the Dutch Navy has been heavily committed to, of course, the naval defense of Europe, especially in the northern and Baltic Sea, and especially there we are seeing increasing incidents in those critical underwater infrastructure. I know, by the way, that you're also a submariner by trade, as is Admiral Caudle. So you probably have a special look at this kind of threats, which also lie at the corner of the civilian and military challenges in terms of coordination. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, or on the general threat landscape, how you perceive it?
Yeah, thank you very much. And first of all, thank you, Nicolas, for inviting us here. And congratulations on the 400 years of the French Navy. And I cannot ignore the fact that the 8th of January, we celebrated 538 years of Netherlands Navy. Not sure what that says, but at least we're in the same circumstances if you look at the threat landscape around us. And I think the role for the Netherlands Navy and Netherlands Armed Forces is to defend the kingdom and to protect the interests of the kingdom. So it's not just the North Sea, it's worldwide. For example, the Caribbean, but also, well, the Netherlands is a trading nation. We've got Rotterdam, it's the main port of Europe. So trade and freedom of navigation is very important to us. So our interests to protect are worldwide, but you're absolutely right. It also starts at the North Sea, immediately out of the port of Den Helder. And if we look at what's happening there, and I'm sure everybody is aware of that, is that we see Russian state ships, Russian-owned ships, of Russian-affiliated ships that are transiting the North Sea, and that's not so big of a problem. But they also loiter over vital infrastructure, possibly in preparations for further actions later on. We see ships operating drones that fly over our territory. And we see the shadow fleet or dark fleet that's fueling the Russian war economy, using ships that are ill-maintained, not insured, and posing all kinds of liability issues in our precious North Sea that is of vital importance to the Netherlands and to Europe, because it's one of the busiest waters in the world. And we also see GPS jamming, GPS denial. And I think the main point here is that we should not accept this as the new normal, because it pushes us back in a position where we have less freedom to maneuver, and that creates us with a less suitable strategic position. So I think a credible response to all these actions that are related to the grey zone is vital of importance to the Netherlands and to the NATO as a whole.
Thank you very much, sir. So we actually, I'd like to inform you that we're on time so far. So I congratulate you for this first round, and now we're approaching our second straight in the navigation plan, which is, of course, how do you live up to these challenges in terms of especially capability development? Admiral Caudle, in 2025, the U.S. Navy has come up with this new shipbuilding plan, much anticipated, of course, by everyone, observers and taxpayers alike, I guess. Can you give us a quick outlook on how does it look like, and how do you intend to meet the challenges mentioned before?
Well, yes, based on everything we just answered, it's a daunting task for the United States to make decisions on how we're going to posture our force best. It's whether or not we do forward deployed naval forces, whether we do rotational deployments. And so all these types of areas of interest that we have to try to figure out where we're going to employ the Navy to meet the vital national interests of our country. Recently, we just released our national security strategy. And in that, it may have been a surprise to some. It wasn't to us because we were helping work this, but the Western Hemisphere has gained a new prominence in our national security strategy to really put a point on what we mean by homeland defense and the threat vectors that we need to actually counter for, in the approaches to the United States mainland itself. The Pacific and the Atlantic is, we have finally convinced, our leadership, and President Trump has taken this on, that we're no longer, it's not, those are not moats any longer, right? And so the proximate threats that we can actually see coming into our homeland we have to address those. And of course, the pacing threat of the People's Republic of China, and then of course the Russia, North Korea, Iran, and proxy threats, of course, are still there. But we have to make decisions on that. And so to do that, and this is in a couple of weeks, I'll be coming out with what we're calling the U.S. Navy Fighting Instructions, which is my worldview and strategy to how to go best handle those situations globally. And in that, you're going to see the introduction of what we call a hedge strategy. And the hedge strategy is a way to think about the employment of general purpose forces, which are aircraft carriers, large combatants, small surface combatants, submarines, air wings, special forces, Marines. So those are general purpose forces. And then how do you tailor those forces into tailored force packages that actually are adaptable enough and tailored enough to actually counter the threat without using, up a bunch of readiness with something that's overmatched and not well suited for that threat. What enables us to do that, or what you'll see in the strategy, are called tailored offsets. And tailored offsets are the combination of robotic autonomous systems, unmanned systems, that force multiply the tailored forces that I'm trying to describe, that again force multiply those capabilities. When you match that with allies and partners as a hedge, then you're able to posture globally, I think, a better way to match the threats that we will face. It will also allow you to, at your timing, at our timing and tempo, mass the forces we need to mass, leveraging what I call the differentiated value of the Navy, our expeditionary nature, our mobility, the fact we can be anywhere in the world in less than 2 weeks, and bring fairly large, mass into that, combat power into that theater. With that strategy, that hedge strategy is important. So now to the point of Golden Fleet here, to your question. The way we view this, and it's certainly I share this and I'm promoting this, is you're optimized when you have a high-low mix. And so at the high end, you definitely want the striking power and the combat mass that the air wing provides from an aircraft carrier. And so large surface combatants, prominence here, and then we're working toward is a battleship class now, which is going to give us something between 25 to 40% more firepower, depending on which ordnance we're talking about, over the Arleigh Burke destroyer. Enough electricity and electrical power and propulsion power to sustain those operations and generate directed energy weaponry at the level we think is relevant going forward into the future, as I talked about. So we're talking about perhaps megawatt class directed energy on that ship. And so that's, a substantial capability. So that will be a capital ship of the Navy. So I can put that ship in places and surround it with some other tailored forces, and that itself will be more than adequate to handle some of the threats that, that we need to counter globally. And then on the low end, you're seeing we're trying to build a frigate again here to, frigate 2.0. So, and learning on the lessons we learned from some of the mistakes we made and with the Constellation, and deliver a frigate, the one that can be built in a timely manner, leveraging the national security cutter the Coast Guard uses, because we think when you put that ship to sea with modular force packages, things that can be containerized from ordnance to unmanned systems to towed arrays, and sky's the limit on what you can modularize there on that platform, then we can build them quickly, field them. But just that high-low mix gives me the flexibility to tailor what I need globally. Because what I find now is I end up having to use carrier strike groups and amphibious strike groups in places where I believe I could tailor a force package that would be more suited to the threat. So hedge, tailored forces, tailored offsets, and then working with partners and allies to actually, buy down some risk for the U.S. and our national interest.
Thank you very much, sir. A lot of ideas and concepts to chew on. I keep in mind the notion that energy generation may be actually in the future one of the choke points or the sizing factors. Now turning to Admiral Liebregs, actually. So not every Navy is the size of the U.S. Navy. It can afford to develop all those capabilities in all those directions. But if we take a good look at the Royal Netherlands Navy, you have undergone a quite deep renewal process in terms of capability development with model vessels concept. What lessons can we learn from a Navy European size, I would say, which has different ways to approach this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities to what Admiral Caudle told us just recently, and I'm proud that we are more or less on the same level in that respect, but not in quite of numbers and capabilities. It's
You wish.
quite a different league. However, if you look at Europe, there's war going on in Europe. We are all aware of that. And I think there's the window of opportunity for Russia. And I think if I look in the audience, everybody knows about this window of opportunity for the Russians until 2028, 2029. So we need to step up the game. And I think we need to prepare for war. So one of my main challenges is to bring more firepower to sea. So we're replacing the entire fleet. We're replacing submarines, frigates, destroyers, amphibious transport ships. The new mine hunters are entering the ports this month, by the way. But building new ships takes time, too much time. So one of the means to overcome this problem is to introduce something that resembles the hybrid fleet concept, which we call the multi-role support vessels. Think of smaller ships, commercial ships, 60, 70, 80 meters, that are modular, that can be containerized. And if you fit a ship like that with a container filled with, for example, Israeli and Barak missiles, all of a sudden our anti-submarine warfare frigates has some very capable air defense capability. And it's got mass, it's got more missiles than it can carry at this moment. And we can introduce dispersed operations at the same time. It fits in this concept, in ASW concept, but also fits in littoral warfare concept. If you introduce loitering ammunition, which you can also launch from this ship. And the same ship that can be low manned, and think of 6 to 8 people, can also be operating on the North Sea, escorting Russian vessels, so saving a lot of very expensive warships, which I cannot afford. So I think it's an affordable way to augment our fleet, to man our fleet, because we also have to have the manning. We can do dispersed operations, and these kinds of ships are very adaptable, and it fits very well to short-cycled innovation, the thing we very much need.
Thank you very much, sir. I take away also this notion of lethality at sea and firepower, which is definitely a change in philosophy. General Jenkins, I think that both of the earlier statements give this importance of unmanned systems in the future of a Navy format. I know that the Royal Navy has promoted the notion of hybrid fleet, which I think with the motto unman whenever possible, man wherever necessary. Can you elaborate on this and tell us a little bit how do you see these challenges in the format of the future Royal Navy?
So, I mean, we've heard from the other speakers, and the Netherlands is doing quite a lot on this as well. And Nicolas and I have had some really good, active, long debates about the transition here. Look, some of this, the historians will tell you, a technological transition, tends to follow a pretty familiar path. what is probably different this time is the speed of the path. So back to the kind of exponential curve and the rising pace of tech change. And that path usually sort of follows the format of cultural resistance to the new technology that's on the place. We saw this with submarines, saw this with aircraft carriers, saw this transition from sail to steam, from paddle to screw. You know, you go back and back, and it's been there all along. So kind of initial resistance to change. Our organizations tend to be quite cautious by nature, which I always find ironic because we're warfighters and risk takers by nature, but organizationally we're quite cautious. So we tend to take an approach which is, well, I'm going to sit back and see how the technology is going to develop, and I will transition at the point that the technology is mature. Well, that's kind of fine in an approach as long as you don't find yourself in a war with somebody who's already transitioned, because you can't afford to be in that situation because you will lose at that point. So the art in this is understanding where this technology is going and how you can maximize the possibility that you don't lose. But that's going to make some hard early choices because by definition, with probably everybody, with the possible exception of the US, but they've got their constraints as well, we don't have the resource to run in parallel. So I can't run the legacy fleet and transition to the new autonomous fleet at the same time and expect to have the best of all worlds. So I've got to make some choice. But fundamentally, the hybrid fleet is about augmentation of the existing fleet. So I'm not going to stop the recapitalization of the Navy. It would be a pretty brave first Royal Marine, first Sea Lord to stop that recapitalization. But I don't want to anyway, because I think certainly what we're looking at, I say certainly, caution with certainty in any sort of predictions of the future at this point. I think the transition to fully autonomous fleets is some way off. I'm a great kind of believer in this analysis that says, okay, any machine will beat any human at any strategy game now. So they can move faster than us at complex strategy, but any human teamed with a machine will beat any machine in a strategy game. So the key at the moment is in how you get this teaming to work. You know, I hear lots of really nice, kind of very passionate theoretical debates about the ethics and the law of machine warfare. I'm sorry, you look at what's happening in Ukraine at the moment. Right now in Ukraine, we have machines hunting based on algorithms with no humans in the loop. You know, that is taking place in warfare today in Europe. So a theoretical discussion about whether you think machines at the edge will have the authority to take action is for the birds, as far as I'm concerned. That is already here as a reality. And if we find ourselves in the crucible of combat, any of those niceties will fall away quite quickly. I'm confident in predicting that. So the challenge now is how quickly we can bring these autonomous systems in to fight alongside the fleet. And I'm afraid, I'm not afraid at all. The tech world has taught us how to do this, and it's through incremental introduction, spiral development. It's through failure and learning from failure in order to bring capabilities back. We are not comfortable with that as military forces and as navies, because we, particularly in the last 30 years, have developed a culture where we are averse to failure, and you have to be able to be willing to take risk on some of this. You know, the lesson is Boeing spaceflight versus SpaceX. You know, if you take a risk-averse, carefully incremental approach, you end up with Boeing and failure. If you take a more iterative spiral development, bit more well-judged risk approach, you end up with SpaceX. You know, and personally, I want to be the force that wins. I don't want to be the force that is sorry that it didn't make the move early enough. So that is, I'm happy to answer detailed questions on the what, but if you want the philosophy that underpins that, that's it.
Thank you very much, sir, for this ahead-looking. Although caution-driven, as you mentioned, maybe not certainty, but let's jump into the unknown because there's no way around it, and I think it's insightful. Admiral Vaujour, France just actually passed his budget law finally, so we have normally a surplus package of extra 6 billion euros for the next 2 years, or at least this year. It should be done, and the French Navy itself is renewing many of its capabilities at the same time. So new SSN fleet, new frigate for the FDE. Finally, the next generation carrier, aircraft carrier, has also been approved recently, but there are also less visible, spectacular evolutions on the way. Can you help us to navigate in those priorities, and how do you see them unfolding in the coming years, given also all the patterns that we just highlighted with your counterparts?
Thank you. As you said, we are renewing at the moment, and so we are on the good path on that field. I mean, SSN, SSBN, aircraft carrier, frigates, MPAs, and so on. So everything is on track. So I'm really happy with that, and thanks to the budget law just voted yesterday. Or today, yesterday. I fully agree with Daryl about the way we have to think the future, ILO mix. I also agree with the thinking of Gwyn about the hybrid fleet. I will not come back on that. I always say that for my strategy, I must be determined in the long term because we need platforms, and very agile in the short term, meaning able to welcome a new technology, like Ukrainians are doing every day on the field in Ukraine, and so that's not that easy because building an aircraft carrier is a 10 years program, and welcoming drones must be something like 1 month program, and so this mix is really tricky. But we need to go through that in order to welcome all the new technology. And we speak today about AI, but perhaps next year we will speak about quantum. We will speak about another technology. I don't know which one, energy, directed energy, and so on and so on. And the question is to be agile enough to welcome all that technology. But one of the problems we do not put on the table now is resilience. When we speak of war, we have to speak about resilience. And resilience, when you have only 15 frigates, not that many, it means that you must have backyards, you must have naval base able to repair, able to put in line your frigate, launch in operation your frigate. And so the readiness of your fleet is something which is critical in the path of war we are right now. So it means for us to improve our resilience, to improve our coherence, meaning more ammunition ready, more capability in terms of industry, dry docks, process in order to be able to repair very quickly one ship in your backyard. So resilience and coherence is fundamental even when you are thinking of capability development, for sure. And the last one is probably something we disagree with Gwyn. The problem of human resource, we will speak about after for training, but at the moment, when you launch one UAV, you need 2 or 3 guys. My issue is to have one guy able to launch 10, 15, 100 UAVs at the same time and be able to operate. And what I see in operation right now is that after the operation Aspides in the Red Sea, we need to reinforce our crews because it was too short in terms of human resource on board. So we reinforce our crew on board frigate, on board submarines, but it is exactly not what we would like to do in the future. And so we have a big issue at that time to be able to welcome new technology with less man on board. And at the moment, I have to say, I rely on the technology and I am not that happy. So there is something to do.
Thank you, Admiral. You're always thinking one step ahead of me. So the OSDA's readiness and service support issues I had planned to tackle after. But yes, I think that you made very convincing point. Admiral Berutti, Bergotto, also the Italian Navy has been renewing, challenging itself, promoting multi-carrier capability, for instance, vessel concept, focusing on platform adaptability. I think that we heard a lot on that. How far this adaptability could go, depending, on all those both tech and environment challenges in terms of maintenance and issues that have been pointed out.
In the shipbuilding, we are facing one problem is the building time of the ship. Yeah. It takes too long from the starting to when the ship is commissioned to the Navy. 5-6 years is really too much for us. And the second one is you have to project a ship now for the future threat. And that is not easy because, as you know, the threats change almost every day. So what we are trying to do is pretty much what Daryl said before. We don't want to change the primary role of the unit. I mean, the ship will be destroyer, craft carrier, but we want to put the ship in a way that we have the capability to adapt the ship a different mission. And this is using modular systems. And the main thing is giving to the ship the growing capability, not only from the power energy. Because, we are going through direct energy weapon, maybe in the future. We are already experimentation this kind of weapon. So you need to have a ship with a grow capability. Because when you commission the ship, this ship lasts for 20 years, pretty much. So you cannot have, after 1 year, an older ship. I mean, I want to share with you an experience that Nicolas knows better than me. I was the first commanding officer of ITS Andrea Doria, Horizon-class destroyer. So when I got the first day the ship, I ran into the CIC, the Central Operation Command, and the monitor, they were cathodic monitor. It was, I'm talking about 2010. So that because the ship was think 6 years before, at that time, that was the technology. So we need to be able to change our way to make the contract with the industry, to change during this year of construction, to be able to react at the new threat. This is the only way that we have to be relevant at sea.
Thank you very much. I think it shows how fast the pace of technology goes and how difficult it is to keep up with that. So still on time, although a little bit less than before. We're entering our final straight before opening the Q&A to the room, and I wanted you to have the opportunity to speak on this. Usually less spectacular, but very much constraining challenges, readiness, training, education, maintenance, and repair, but also in the training, the interoperability part. So I have to spread out the questions, but feel free to rejoin or comment on each other if you feel that you want to mention some aspect. Admiral Liebregs, I wanted to turn to you first. We know the Royal Netherlands Navy, like I guess all the navies here, is facing some, of course, stress on Navy personnel, availability, retention, and this cruise demands for high intensity operations. It puts even more constraints on them. How do you approach this personnel issues? And of course, for the others, feel free to comment.
Yeah, thank you for the question. There's multiple sides to these questions. First of all, I think something happened in Europe. So we have been struggling with shortages of personnel for a couple of decades. But now, for the first time in years, we see that the retention rate is pretty okay. People stay within the Navy longer, especially if you compare it to industry, and especially the maritime industry. So retention is okay, and recruitment and influx is also picking up. So where we had 4 moments in a year where people could start their initial education, we will grow to 5 to 6 a year, and they're full. People are really willing to join the Navy. And I think one of the reasons why this is happening is that we introduced something like the service year or CAP year. It's a voluntary year where people can join the armed forces for 1 year, and they get minimal education. We give them a short education, put them on sea, and guess what? After a year of sailing, they are very capable sailors. So that says something about how we educate people. And the good thing about this approach is that it reaches more of the population, and the retention of these people is very good. Over 70% of the people that start this voluntary service year, they stay within the Navy. So that's very helpful. And we also have a different approach to it. That's what we call national resilience training. That's students in university, they can do a minor, and that's about 20 weeks, 10 weeks of theory in university, and 10 weeks for basic military training. And they become a reservist after that, and they get study points for it. So it's kind of it's an engine to get people more acquainted and more familiar with the armed forces. And I see a lot of people, they want to contribute to their nation more than we used to. So personnel is still a problem, especially if you look at the amount of technical skilled personnel. We're short of them, certainly. But I think people have the right mindset. They go to sea. Every ship I send to sea, they really have the right mindset. So I don't want to talk about the problems with mindset. I think Nicolas nailed it, and he said it's about resilience. So it's about sustainment. Can we really sustain the fleet for longer periods, even in the weekend, 24/7, and when there's no electricity in my main port, or there's cyber attacks, or maybe even physical challenges to our port? How do we handle those kinds of challenges? And I think that's the main issue.
Thank you very much, sir. It is very comprehensive. I don't know, like, do anyone want to rejoin? Yes.
I'll make just a quick comment.
Yeah.
One is on the technology piece, if I could, just
Yeah.
back up just a minute. Something that my team and I talk about a lot is, when I came into the Navy, our military led in technology advancement. We were the actual organizations that were leading edge technology. And then over my career, that's flipped to be commercial. Yeah. And so but the model by which I acquired technology didn't update to the same methodology, and for me not leading that any longer. So acquisition reform and requirement setting reform and all that is in progress for us, but that's got to get fixed. So I just wanted to talk about that little paradigm shift. One of the things I will say, the mission is why people retain. And so I think what's happening is because all of our mission has improved, I think you're seeing high retentions probably across all of our navies. Recruiting and accessions can be more of an issue, but retention's certainly good. I think the bigger problem that I see, and it's something Harold talked about, It is in the technical workforce. It is in the shipbuilding. We went back and looked when in kind of into the Cold War, and we were really trying to build a large Navy. The typical shipyard worker was making somewhere between 3 and 5 times our minimum wage, okay, in the United States. So back then the minimum wage roughly around $3 an hour. This is mid 80s, and they were making $15 an hour. So that compensation was significant above minimum wage. Today we're in a place where working at, I hate to say it, but McDonald's is actually quite comparable to working in our shipyard. And so the challenge of doing shipyard work versus, a job like a fast food restaurant is a decision space now for people. So, we have got to go figure out the compensation here and land that correctly, because we're just not going to actually recruit, retain, and sustain a workforce that we need in our navies without the compensation being there. It's expensive. I admit that. But, what's the alternative?
Absolutely. And the meaning of the mission is maybe not enough. Thank you.
No, it's, we are facing a big problem about recruiting and retention. But we need to change our mind. When I joined the Navy, it was me to adapt at the Navy. Nowadays, with the new generation, sometimes we need to be able to adapt our organization to the new generation. And the new generation, they want to be professional, they want to be well-trained, and they want to have a period for themselves. So we need to invest more on welfare, and giving them some opportunity, especially when we move people from south to northern Italy. We really need to give to them a place to stay and all the welfare around them. That wasn't in this way in the Italian Navy. I know that U.S., their welfare is very well proven. So we need to do the same thing. This is the only way that we can have to keep people. Now, 2 differences. One is about operational guy. The operational guy, they stay on board, they like to go abroad, they like to do deployment. Technician. In this moment, there is not that many specific technician people. So it's easy that industry come to the Navy and said to this guy, I double up your salary, I give you a great family life, leave the Navy. They do it. So we are facing both. Problem to get people, but the main problem is to keep it, especially from the technical point of view.
Thank you very much, sir. Very much highlight the challenges. Sir, what about the Royal Navy's approach to this personnel issues? But I was also intending on to ask you about the maintenance issue and the readiness of the equipment, because we're talking about the men, but also the issue about the platforms, as we said, with all those very different forms of them.
Yeah, I think so. Just to sort of echo Harold's point. We appear, touch wood, being cautious, not tempting fate, we appear to have turned a corner on retention and recruiting at the moment. So the Navy, for the first time in years, grew last year and is projected to grow by more this year at the moment. Retention is up, recruiting is up. Some of that is definitely driven by sense of purpose, so this kind of mission set and this idea that this is a challenging time and we do need people to step up. Some of it is driven by the recapitalization narrative, which is people generally like to join organizations that are being invested in. Projecting forward, we're in this great place. In 2 years' time, we're going to be producing a frigate every 6 months off the line, coming into the fleet. And that produces some challenges for us. That's true, but they're great challenges to have. And the overall narrative will be one of a Navy that is on the front foot and is being invested in. So, I think that's all fantastic. No complacency about any of that at all. So, to Giovanni's point, the modern generation are fantastic. I do not hold with the kind of language that you hear about. They're kind of soft, they're flaky, they're not up for this. It was the same thing that my predecessors said about my generation. We all grew up with trainers, our feet wouldn't take it, we couldn't, we didn't have the mettle for it. It's just not true. They're every bit as resilient as we were, I think. They are more professional than we were when we joined. They drink less, they're more interested in their career. That makes them quite demanding as a group. But in the recruiting bit in particular, that's what we found is they have less patience. They're more aware of their opportunities and what they can do. And if when they apply to us, if we can't step in pretty quickly and show them a route to joining the Navy, that they'll go and do something else. They don't have the patience to hang around. So a lot of our successes on recruiting have involved streamlining our processes, making sure we can get them through their medicals quickly. If there are issues with the medical, make sure we can resolve those really quickly so they don't find themselves waiting for a year for another intake to try and join. It's those kind of pieces that bring people in. On the kind of resilience and the maintenance of the fleet, I mean, I talk a lot about hybrid fleet. I believe in the technological transition that is on us and our need to respond to it. But the hard yards of warfighting are the preparations now, not some dream of what we might look like in 4 or 5 years' time. I think that is absolutely necessary. But the Royal Navy's warfighting plan 2029, that is about how we fight with what we've got, not how we dream about the future. And that is the hard yards of improving our maintenance and sustainment to be able to manage the fleet we have so that if the call comes, we're not found wanting. And I think sometimes in our Navy, we can fall foul of trying to wish everything away with the desire for more resource. Yeah, if only we got more money, then everything would be all right. If only the taps were unlocked, then everything would be all right. It's just not. It's not true. We don't have the industrial capacity for a start. My challenge to our team is there is a lot that we can do ourselves right now. And before we start accusing the politicians of not stepping up on resource, we should look to ourselves and ask ourselves if we've done everything we possibly can to make sure I've got this fleet as ready to go as it could be. So one of the biggest pieces of work we've got at the moment is on our nuclear submarine fleet sustainment and how we improve the maintenance figures through the fleet. I'm on the record, and so is our Defence Secretary, of saying that our current maintenance statistics are not good enough. And they are the result of 30 years of disinvestment in defence, in the so-called post-Cold War dividend, and we are correcting that. And I'm in this brilliant position again where my problem is not resource now. My problem is one of organisation and how we optimise ourselves for great performance. We're having great discussions with the US, great discussions with France, sharing best practice wherever we can and getting after those sort of problem sets. Lastly, I talk about recapitalisation of the fleet, frigates, submarines. Actually, the really important bit is the fleet solid support ships that are now in build and our ability to sustain the fleet at sea. So, we get drawn to the warships. It's actually the sustainment ships that I'm more interested in. And whatever we do with hybrid, we're still going to have to sustain that fleet at sea. We haven't yet invented the magic machine that can do self-sustainment at sea. So we're going to have to do that.
Thank you very much, sir. Good to hear that. Admiral Vaujour, I wanted you to have the last word before we open to the Q&A, but we have 12 minutes left for the Q&A. So if you can maybe give your 1 minute view on those 1 century long issues, it'd be great. Thank you.
I think all my colleagues speak about everything. Only one word: demography, which will be the biggest issue we will have to face in terms of human resource, especially in Europe, because our demographic path is not that good. It means that we will have more and more challenge to recruit and to maintain the guys in the Navy. Full stop.
Thank you. That was precise and on point. So now we have, I was just saying, 12 minutes for Q&A. Please raise your hand. There should be mic circulating. State your questions as concisely as possible. And I'm surprised I don't see like many hands. Yeah, see. So thank you. There's a mic coming right now.
Jens Lorenz, I'm the diplomatic advisor of the German commander of the German Joint Forces. One question to the European allies. We have all read the US defense strategy, and for me it didn't contain so many surprises. For me it seemed quite well reflected from a US point of view. But what does this mean for the European allies? It advocates for a sort of a partition of responsibilities, United States, homeland, Western Hemisphere, and Pacific, Europeans, Europe, North Atlantic. But at the same time, the Europeans have to also remain to have interests in the Pacific, free trade routes. What are you thinking about this problem?
Thank you, sir. I'm going to collect a couple more questions. I see one in the upper part, and so maybe we collect 3-4 questions and let you answer how you want. Please signal me if there are other questions in the room, sir. And then, yes, and then here, ma'am.
Good morning, Dr. Lee Willett, a writer for Naval News. General Jenkins talked about the underwater threat, and CNO very ably mentioned the fact that the new lower-end surface combatant for the US Navy may have a modular capability for dealing with tasks like the underwater threat. With the 5 chiefs we have here, we have very, very capable underwater navies. I wondered if they comment about how they can do more to combine that ability to deal with the underwater threat, whether it's surface-based or subsurface-based, to generate a collective capacity to push that threat back. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There will be, by the way, a press conference for the journalists right after, but you're free to ask questions now. Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Sophie Quinton, University of Portsmouth and Centre for Strategic Studies of the French Navy, which kind of fait de moi a sort of a bridge between the UK and France. It's a pleasure to see you all. My question, Sir Gwyn, if I may, relates to amphibious forces of the Royal Navy. Obviously, it is very much your background. There's been considerable debates in the UK about fleet decline, amphibious fleet decline, and the need for adjustment of the Royal Marines Corps in your country. Would you elaborate on where do you think this essential part of the Royal Navy is going to go, and if it is ready for action? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. So let's take those first 3 if you want. So we have the USNDS and what it means for the Europeans in terms of areas of deployment. We have one on underwater threats and cooperations of navies, and one on amphibious capabilities, more directly pointed to Sir Gwyn. But maybe who wants to start? Please.
Since I got the direct question, thank you very much. I'm going to combine all 3 of those. So I thought the kind of US strategy was very pragmatic in its approach, and it's been very well telegraphed. So I don't think it is a shock to anyone. I must admit, my reading of it wasn't that we should only focus on Europe to the exclusion of our other interests. I think it very sensibly talked about taking responsibility for our own space. Your point on our other interests. I'm often asked, what would be the UK's role in a conflagration in the Pacific? Well, I don't have a crystal ball as to how that's going to unfold, but all I would say is The UK has millions of passport holders in the Pacific region. We are utterly dependent on the Pacific for our trade and prosperity in the UK. The idea that we're not going to be involved in some way, I'm not saying that is the same as joining in for a war, for instance, but the idea that we're not going to be involved is just not credible to me. We will not be able to ignore something if it happens in the Pacific, even if we wanted to, and I wouldn't advocate for ignoring it. But I think the argument that we should take responsibility for the European theatre, I think that's really sensible. And the uncomfortable thing for most of us as Europeans is we haven't done that, and we're under the spotlight, and I welcome that. I welcome that challenge. That relates directly to the underwater threat. I would say of all the domains, the underwater space is perhaps where we already work the closest together. So, the level of cooperation, collaboration, and sharing is phenomenal, particularly at the most sensitive levels, because it has to be. And you just have to watch the way that we respond at the moment to Russian out of area deployments. It is a whole team effort in order to be able to do that effectively, and will only become more so. The amphibious forces, I think, remain essential to the plan. So I talk a lot about Northwestern Europe and the kind of NATO war plans, the new JOA that is Northwestern Europe, commanded out of Norfolk, and how that's going to evolve. It's really clear to me that if we don't secure the northern Norway coast, we will have a real problem trying to tie down the Atlantic. So we've got to be able to exercise sea denial in the high north and sea control as we come further south. And you can't do that if you don't have ownership of the Norwegian coast. And the commando and littoral forces from the Netherlands, from the UK, from the US are a really important component in that mix. Not least the utility that they provide for wider global responsibilities as well. You would expect me, as the First Marine, First Sea Lord, to be arguing hard for the littoral capability in the UK, and I am. But what I would say is there again, in the transition to hybrid capabilities, we're very fortunate with the commandos that we began the transition to hybrid about 10 years ago, and in many ways we foresaw what has happened in Ukraine in how we build hybrid forces that can distribute over a wider area of terrain in order to reduce the kind of threat frontage and the challenges to the opponents. We've got to do the same at sea. So, our approach as we step forward, and particularly if we work closely with the Dutch on this, we need more distributed amphibious forces that are spread over a bigger area, that have less of a threat surface to the kind of uncrewed challenge that we're going to face as we try and do littoral operations. That poses its own challenges, but it does meet a different requirement that we have to fulfill. Watch this space for the Defence Investment Plan.
Thank you, sir. Points well taken. Admiral Vaujour, maybe to comment on whatever questions you want to comment on.
No, I think it was interesting to merge the two questions about anti-submarine warfare and the NSS and DS. When our interests are aligned, we are very, very, very close, and we are able to operate shoulder to shoulders everywhere in the world. And so the NDS, NSS give us a clarification of where is the US interest. That's very nice to have. And like this, we can work together. Sometimes we disagree. It was the case, for example, in the Red Sea. We do not have done the same operation. One was fighting the Houthis, one was protecting the commercial shipping line. And that's it. It doesn't mean that we are not speaking together and that we are not working together as we are doing in the high north against Russian submarines, where we are very close. So it means that we need to continue what we are doing today, meaning reinforcing trust and confidence between us. And when at the political level our interest is converging, everything is possible.
Thank you, sir. I think that
Maybe I'll
makes
just
the
talk,
transition pretty obvious.
Yeah, I'll just speak generally about a couple of things. One, I think my good friend Sir Gwyn nailed it when he said that undersea warfare is a team effort, and it has to be because of its complexity. We moved away, probably a decade plus ago from this idea that submarines would form this ring of steel around our high-value units. that is a completely ineffective way to conduct this business. By the time you penetrate that ring of steel with modern munitions, you're now in range of the high-value unit. So we shifted to this idea of theater undersea warfare. And so we have theater undersea warfare commanders. And these command centers work collaboratively across the globe to share just exactly the way Gwyn discussed, to make sure that we're approaching this as a team sport. And this is use of submarines, surface ship, which are very, very capable, and of course our maritime patrol aircraft as well. So full spectrum there. But when I think of this, to generalize what I just laid down, I kind of think of these kind of 6 principles. And I think it applies to the team you're seeing in front of you, is we have to be clear-eyed and united on what the theory of the fight is, and even perhaps more important, what the theory of victory is. And when you have that common sense of what those things look like, then you take an accounting, an intellectually honest accounting of each of our capabilities and our capacity to deliver that capability. When you do that, you then can posture. You can actually lay that force down most effectively to actually utilize and optimize our force most effectively. What enables all that to work, and many have talked about, is not just command and control, it's command and control and communication. You know, I very seldom ever say C2. It's always C3, okay? It has to be C3, which ties to very tight interoperability. If you cannot communicate with each other, you will not be effective. And so that goes to systems, you know, C4I, and upgrades and modernization, and all those concerns, you know, that come into play with that. Then I had to have a deep understanding of each nation's authorities. And as Nicolas said, they're going to have national caveats with missions. You know, this can even play when we cross-deck with each other. You know, you can have sailors on board where the nation is not necessarily behind the mission that we perhaps are involved in. So these things are delicate and they're handled appropriately, but there's plenty of mission to go around. So while we need capacity for the sea lines of communication in the Red Sea, we also need to perhaps, you know, fight the Houthis simultaneously. And then the last thing, which we haven't talked a lot about, some extent with Gwyn talking about combat logistics force, is sustainment. So point 6 here is all of this has to be sustained at sea. And so, you know, the pros do logistics, and that's the most important of all this. And how we interoperate with our combined logistics forces so that we utilize those in an optimized way is extremely important.
Thank you very much, sir. I must admit, I was a bit afraid when you started to say there are 6 principles, but we went through all of them. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Admiral, about maybe also the underwater, because I know that there are some centers of excellence in Italy for that.
Absolutely. What I want to say, the underwater threat is an invisible one. It's not easy to fight, but we are a very capable platform. We have a very capable crew, and I think with the all sensor that we put together, we do have also a good situational awareness. So I won't say that we know where they are at the moment, but I'm very convinced that with the great exchange of information that we are putting on in this moment, we can really fight easily this threat. What I want to say, the MED is again is very small sea, but with all the sensor net that there is around, we are able to track whatever is going on underwater. Really, same thing is in the Atlantic. So the key is sensor, platform, exchange of information.
Thank you, sir. We're closing in on target and short on time, so there's, you know, time to hear Amiral Liebregs to have a final word, and then we'll move to the press conference immediately.
Much has been said. I'll keep it short. And I think if you look at ASW, I feel that we, at the tactical level, have neglected our skills very much. So we need to improve this. We need realistic training. And I think realistic training is vital in everything we do. So if you have realistic training, you need to know exactly what you're going to do in times of conflict. So you need to have your war plans ready. You need to know who you're fighting against, and you need to know who you're fighting with. And I think you need to rehearse all these kinds of evolutions so that you're ready to win the fight. And it can be very at the tactical level, but I think Admiral Caudle said it's at the theater level ASW. And I think there's a parallel to integrated air and missile defense that the more you're left of launch, the better it is.
Thank you very much. I think that you can join me in thanking our wonderful panelists. And this is only the beginning for the Paris Naval Conference. So now have the press conference. I think that the cocktail waiting for us. Thank you.
Thank you.